Talked a little earlier about architecture as one of the functional expertise roles on a systems engineering project, and also about being a chief engineer. On a recent project that I've worked on, I was serving as the chief engineer, and I felt that the community and the project needed a different type of architecture view. And let me describe the challenge, and then I'll show you the picture to give you a sense. So there's a couple things I'm doing here with this segment. I'm demonstrating thought leadership, and then I'm also describing again that functional expertise that's needed, as well as the chief engineer. So again, as a chief engineer, I felt it needed more architecture, a different type of architecture view than they had. The challenge that I saw that led me to this idea was that this complicated satellite communication system involved trucks, airplanes, satellite, of course, ground stations, and they were having a lot of discussions about how to test all that in a way that was representative of how it would really work in real life. They were talking about testing pieces of it, like the truck is going to work, it's going to have an antenna dish on it, and it's going to talk to the satellite, and the community is pretty comfortable about how that's going to work. That's going to fine. On the aircraft, they weren't so comfortable. They felt like there were going to be some challenges with testing the satellite communications link with the aircraft, and the kind of equipment that was going to be needed on that aircraft, and how much it was going to weigh, and how much space it was going to take on the aircraft, physical space. They weren't sure about like how cold the plane could get. You know how when you go up in elevation, airplanes get really cold. They were struggling with, all the little individual pieces that somebody on the airplane, in this case, to talk on a handset on the aircraft in an extremely cold environment. How cold does the equipment need to be on that aircraft and still be able to perform and talk, complete the satellite link? So there's different discussions going on, and it's a lot of different entities involved in this satellite communications network. And I realized that there was a rather simple picture. Now, when I show you this picture, you're not going to think simple, but trust me, for the community and looking at all these individual pieces, this picture has become a centerpiece, a go-to reference picture for talking about any aspect of this communications network. So, 8 years into this project, I felt like they were missing a simple architecture view. That's thought leadership. I'm the chief engineer. I should be pushing the envelope on ideas. And I reached back to my days when I was an architect, and I was able to give good guidance to the current architect to draw me a certain picture. So for this satellite communications network, you see this okay? You can see in the middle here a series of satellites. And each one of these clusters of equipment represent different platforms or different entities. Ground stations come in a few different flavors and types. And all that detail shows every individual box and cable that is involved going from that satellite wirelessly down to this ground station and all the way through to the end of the communications link and then back around. So different types of ground stations, aircraft, and all those same kinds of considerations that I just talked about. A truck, a military truck in this case, a different type of aircraft. And so on one sheet of paper, you're able to see, we like to say, from end to end, everything that's involved in this communications network, this satellite communications network. And again, that's proven to be an extremely valuable, relatively simple drawing that the community didn't have before, and now it helps to make communications that much clearer and precise when they're talking about low-level detailed things, and that's always a challenge on every project. Two more examples related to being a thought leader on a project. Initial plans are developed, of course. You'll come to find that in the handbook that you get for your robotics project. And those steps in the planning that you'll see there usually are sufficient to carry a project through from beginning to end. But sometimes in the world with these large complex systems, that initial planning doesn't end up being sufficient. As the project evolves from design into development, and you start getting into testing and realize not everything's working out as originally planned, that original planning piece a lot of times needs to be revisited, and you have a lot of dependencies in order to make the project successful that you may not have originally identified. For example, I guess let's jump back to the Humvee example with the truck, the armored vehicle. I talked about that early opportunity to take a similar type vehicle and mock it up with some armor plates and iron plates and shields and take it to a river and do some preliminary crude testing. You may not have originally planned for that, and so, but you realized a few months into the project that that would be a very good thing to do before you get into full-scale production. But first you need to get a truck, you need to get permission to take a truck into a river, you need to find a place, and so you got to sort out some of these details, and you end up having to coordinate with a lot of people in order to make things like this happen. And this comes up a lot in these complex systems that you'll be working on in the future. On this recent project I was on, involving a lot of stakeholders, trying to develop a capability that was what we call a joint capability, a new feature for senior military to communicate effectively during wars. It was a combined effort. It needed contributions from different organizations, and they had a lot of difficulty in staying in sync on what they were trying to achieve, what their contributions were, and how that was all going to be synchronized in order to come together at the right time to be able to introduce this new capability, new feature. So we had our original schedule. The different contributors had their schedules. We had a plan to work together, but it was not clear enough to the decision makers who had to approve money and more money to be spent and resources. So I took some schedulers and some of my test functional experts, and we got together and we talked about how all these different pieces needed to be integrated and tested, and what is that going to take to make that happen if we think about all the work that's got to get done today for all these pieces to become available, for them to be integrated and tested, and then ultimately we can declare success. So what I'm about to show you is this kind of a basic looking schedule in one sense. Just so you take note, the yellow is there to protect some of the sensitivity or classification of the information. Nothing is classified, but there is some sensitivities. So just to be safe, you see the yellow covering certain things. But just a quick orientation. This is a type of schedule, yes, but not a typical traditional schedule that you find on a project. This is a schedule produced by a chief engineer for the community to literally all be on the same page, understanding the following. So on the bottom, I said all the different pieces of the truck that are being built by different manufacturers. What's the status? So I put a row here for like the chassis. I put a row here for like the transmission. I put a row here for like the armor plates that get added, because those are all in development right now, and their development timelines are different. Some are they're going to be done with the chassis in 6 months. They're going to be done with the transmission, 3 months later. So I put all the manufacturing stuff down here at the bottom, and in the middle, in this blue band in the middle, I said that's where we're going to take the different pieces and put them together, assemble them. We're going to put the transmission into the chassis at this event right here, because they're going to be available at a certain point in time. So I can integrate them together and I can test them. So this whole band, integration and test, this whole middle section, the major emphasis of this particular schedule is on integration and test of all those different pieces. And then, last but not least, this very top row, the white row, I saved it for the big overarching goals or milestones. And so by creating this simple picture and taking different pieces of schedules from different players and thinking hard about integration and test, I was able to create a breakthrough plan that has helped the community tremendously. And I've done this for several projects, and it's a different way of looking at the problem.